All right, so sixth Sunday of the Easter season, Mother's Day, and we'll be reading from John 15, 9 through 17. And it's all Ray's fault, because he picked it. Jesus said, "As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything I have learned from my Father I made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last. And so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command: love each other." All right. So we are almost done with the Easter season. As a matter of fact, if you're real particular about your seasons of the church year, this will actually be the final Sunday of the Easter season. And if the real nitpicky ones will refer to next Sunday and that week as Ascension Tide, that they've kind of carved it out from the end of the 50 days of Easter to include the Ascension and the moving into that last Sunday in Easter, or the Sunday and that follows, I guess. Anyway, now that we're nearly done, these last few weeks, as you've noticed, have been an exercise in retrospective recollection. The first 3 Sundays of Easter, Easter Day, Easter 2, and Easter 3, are always resurrection appearances. Sundays 4, 5, and 6 are always somewhere back in the gospel story that we should understand differently, listening to them before Easter versus after Easter. And that's the same every year. Even though the readings are different, all of them should be a gospel story that should have kind of an added level of poignancy or an added dimension of understanding post-resurrection, which is why we get it when we do. So this gospel happens before the resurrection. And if you were at the 9 o'clock service when I preached and referenced this, you know exactly when this was. What's the context for John 15 and saying these words? What's Jesus doing with his disciples?
He's kind of giving his last instructions to his troops.
Last instructions to his troops, because we recognize this situation or setting, we give it a name. What's the name? This is in the context of the Last Supper, or Monday, Thursday, or however we want to call it. Are they okay? Okay.
We are all promoted.
Oh, okay, that's good. Anyway, so this is kind of an interesting one because it's not real deep into one of the Gospels. This is like Holy Week. This is right before the crucifixion and the resurrection. As a matter of fact, it's right before as you can get without actually being the crucifixion and the resurrection. So there in the upper room, his last instructions, he has, this is in the context, he's washed the feet of the disciples. They're about to share the Passover, and then he gives them these instructions. As a matter of fact, what we refer to as the Novum Mandatum commandment, which we get Mondi from, the new commandment is in here. So this is 100% a Monday, Thursday reading. So just have that kind of rolling around our heads. Okay. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. How has the Father loved the Son. This is just a
So
guess.
Let him come here.
Let him come to earth, yeah. So here's why I remember many years ago watching someone, I was like a third party here, going through a hard time, and a very well-meaning but still young Christian friend like listened to this hard circumstance the other was going through, and then just kind of looked in the eyes and said, abide in Jesus. Abide in his love. And I think that that person was trying to be comforting and helpful and say something very true. But from that moment, pretty much until now, it really annoyed me because it seems so empty. Not empty in the sense of, I think these words are empty. I mean, it seemed like too abstract to be of specific help under specific circumstances. Like, I'm going to pour out my heart to you about something tragic that just happened this morning, and I'm really struggling. But what you tell me is like, it's so broad. It's not wrong, but it kind of feels, I don't know, like it's missing some specifics. That's why it's, well, how does the Father love the Son? So this doesn't stay as a bumper sticker, but we get a little content, like we can think through the mechanics of this a little bit. Bruce?
Sending them to the earth to die
Yeah.
does not sound like a great love.
You know, right. That is kind of an interesting way to put it, especially since just a little further on, you know, greater love has no one than this, he laid down his life for his friends.
Yeah.
So at the very least, how the Father loves the Son is very complicated. And by complicated, I don't mean like good things and bad things. I mean difficult to pin down with simple specifics. So they are one in essence. So that love, and you know, God is love. And we'll get that from 1 John, just not in this particular reading. And so there is this perfect divine love that fully unites the two of them. And the specifics of that are kind of hard to pin down. And maybe it is beyond us to do anything other than poke at. But the thought is, sometimes we can take these broad phrases and we can repeat them. But sometimes even the broad phrases, if we give a little something to it that's specific, can actually be more helpful. So, and in that complicated, comprehensive, essential, united way that the Father loves the Son, Jesus says, well, that's the way I've loved you. So I might say, do you believe that? But that seems like a creedal statement. That's not what I mean. I mean more along the lines of, how is that so? How does Jesus love us in the way the Father loves him?
You keep my commands.
Aha. So that very next phrase. If you keep, just as I've kept my Father's commands and I remain in his love, if you keep my commands, you will remain in my love. We do not like to think these days in terms of love and obedience. I'll just say that flat out. Obedience is not a virtue, is not a contemporary virtue. Obedience is if it's used at all, it's kind of like a derogatory term, right? Because only the foolish or the weak or the oppressed have to obey. Obeying someone or something makes it sound like the others is superior and one's inferior, and that's no good these days. Am I off base, or are you following me? Okay.
In American culture. Anyway.
Sure, right. And yet there is an essential connection here. It's all, you know, in two sentences, Jesus says, the love the Father has for me, I have shown you. If you wish to remain in it, be obedient, as I have remained in the love of the Father by being obedient. How do love and obedience interconnect?
If you love first, then you want to please.
Okay? You want to please the person that you love, and so you do what they say. Okay? Even today, that seems like a very difficult statement, because we're either going, well, that's abusive or that's enabling. You know, if you love someone, you're going to do what they say. Wow, that sounds terrible. But there was a time where we could kind of separate that out and talk about it. And I would say, are there any other times that you can think about where love and obedience are interconnected? Like a specific circumstance or a relationship, or it's not a marriage vow anymore. Did you have obey in yours?
I think so.
Okay, you didn't,
I did.
because you used the prayer book, and the prayer book didn't have it anymore. Now, because I grew up under the 79 prayer book, and I just don't remember off the top of my head, I want to say that obey was in the woman's vows, but not in the man's. Am I right?
Yeah,
I think so.
yeah.
I think so. All the more reason for people to say, I'm not going to obey. So what else? Love and obedience. I think it's closer to that. I think it's closer to that. That when a parent lays down the law, can it have an element of anger or retribution or pettiness? Of course it can. But that's not the real purpose of it. And when they do it the right way, when parents do it the right way, they're laying down the law, you must do such and such. It is out of love. Do not run across the street without looking. You know, do not stick that fork in the outlet. And it sounds harsh. Oh man, you told me what I can't do. But at the heart of it, those sort of commands are based on care for the other person. This will hurt you. This will kill you. This will harm you. But there are also ones that aren't quite so immediate. Like, you know, don't stick a fork in the outlet, doesn't smack your hand kind of stuff. But more, what about don't take things that don't belong to you? Your parents ever give you a command, something like that? What's the old mama always said, if you can't say something nice, don't say. So those are not like danger commands, but they're like commands. Why do parents give those sort of rules to children? To teach them what?
To be nice and to
Grow
love
up.
people and to not hurt somebody else.
Okay, we want nice children, but I would say it's deeper than niceness, which is true. I would say we want them to be good. You know, good, not just as a quality of their ability to do things, but as a moral quality, as a quality of reflecting the nature of God himself. We want children who grow up to be good people, and they're kind and they're nice and they do the right thing and so on. So we teach them these commandments because we love them, and we want them to feel the sense of satisfaction, accomplishment that occurs through maturity. You know, we don't want them to learn things the hard way. We don't want them to go down the long, hard road before they come back around and do things the way that it's going to be better for them, and for them to feel successful and happy and satisfied with their lives. And so we teach them things with the hopes it will benefit them, if not right now, at some other point, later on, into the person they become. And how does us obeying what we're commanded keep us in the love of God?
So I guess if you think of it as being in a groove,
Okay, being in a groove.
you're in God's groove.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, you're supposed
So you
to be
stay in
more-
it.
Yeah,
If you're supposed to be more like him.
You're
then-
supposed to be more like him. So how can you be more like him unless you're doing what he wants you to do? Yeah, I think all of those are true. I think there is, it's a subtle, but I think it's a significant point of connecting our faith with our actions. That the internal beliefs with the external behaviors. To love God is not just the warm feelings in our hearts, but it has to be demonstrated, it has to be manifest, it has to be carried out, it has to be practiced in some fashion on the outsides of us as well, through the way that we treat people and speak and handle our time and money and all that other sort of stuff. That to say that I love you, but then I ignore you doesn't make a whole lot of sense. To say that I love you and then I treat you badly doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So this is like where the concept of love becomes a little more practical and observable. I've told you this, that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. My command is this. This is the novum mandatum, the new commandment. Love each other as I have loved you. What was the commandment before that? If that's the new one. What's the old one?
Love the Lord your God.
Okay, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength is the first commandment, and the second is like unto it. Love your neighbor, that's the each other part. How? As yourself. So the old commandment is love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus says, I'm gonna give you a new commandment. It's related, but it's different. And on Monday, Thursday, I'll talk about up in the ante or raising the stakes or raising the bar. What might be the difference between loving someone in the way that you love yourself versus loving someone the way that Jesus loves them?
Jesus' love is more perfect, better,
Yeah, Jesus loves me more than I love me,
forever perfect.
right?
more perfect love.
More perfect love, a truly divine love that is not hampered by frailty and imperfection and short-term thinking. And what's a way that Jesus loves you more than you love you? Just off the top of your head. I mean, it doesn't have to be intensive,
He
private or
thinks of me
anything.
all the time. He thinks of me all the
He
time.
thinks of you all the time.
And I don't think of him all the time.
Even yes, when we have trouble sometimes forgetting ourselves.
Sometimes don't forgive ourselves. That's right. We carry burdens that we probably shouldn't, but we do.
Sometimes I do things that probably aren't good for me.
Oh. So when we do stuff that's not good for us, we know it. What we, eat or drink or the way that we, how well do you take care of your body? Do you take care of it with the sort of love that Jesus has for you, or a love that's like, it'll work out, I guess. I'll have that second slice, whatever, I'm not going to exercise. There is it's kind of diffuse, but I think there's a real distinction there. We love ourselves, maybe more than we love anyone else, maybe not, but he's now set the terms outside of fallible humanity. So even if you love yourself a lot, well, that's not going to be enough. Because human love is not the same as perfect, glorious, divine love. It's gonna require something outside of ourselves. In order to love each other with the love of Jesus, we actually need that love of Jesus first. And then we have to be able to show that love of Jesus. If we don't have it, we can't show it. Greater love is no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. This is kind of one of the moments that I think is why we have this reading today. So just think for a moment. Hearing these words in the upper room, Last Supper, and being reminded of these words a month and a half after the resurrection. What's the difference?
Seen it actually happen.
Yeah, right.
It's not academic. So if somebody says, greater love has no one than to lay down one's life for his friends. I mean, that sounds like a wise statement. But to then actually see it happen, well, that kind of means something, right? It's not abstract. It's not something that's just sounded clever, but it was something that he was willing to actually do all the way. What's something else that you might think of differently hearing this before and after?
He knew what was going to happen.
He did. There's a real element of the nature of a sacrifice when it is carefully informed and chosen. The concept of like in a split second, do you push a child away from an oncoming car and get hit yourself? And that is a sacrifice of love, tremendous, amazing. But then well before something were to happen, to like basically sign up for, a sacrifice that good and well is going to happen, and you have to kind of think through it and choose to do it anyway. Maybe the sacrifice of putting yourself in danger for a family member because they, fall down a hole or something, or trapped somewhere, you have to get them out, burning building maybe, versus maybe, yes, I will donate a kidney to you. There's a lot of thinking that has to come through that, and a lot of time, and with a lot of knowledge. Are you sure you want to do this? And you say yes. And I think there's a part of that too. One more thing that I would suggest. What else could you think of in retrospect, a month and a half after the resurrection versus before the crucifixion?
Well, it reinforces your belief, because prior to his death, it was like, he's gonna do this and this and this. And, you said, But afterwards, when you look back on it, in retrospect, you say, hey, everything he said.
Yeah. So your belief is reinforced because he actually meant what he said and he carried it out. And so all these things start to take maybe a new level of trust. Like, wow, he really meant all that stuff. I would say there's one little additional. So Jesus is as the resurrected Jesus is sometimes referred to as the first fruits of the new creation. The glorified resurrected body is the promise of how God will treat us. So in essence, this is like skipping to the end of the book and getting a glimpse of how stuff turns out. So greater love has no one than this, they lay down their lives for their friends. And that seems like a romantic sacrifice, not romance like affection, but I mean like very emotional. But then how do you know it's worth it? And I don't mean this in a quid pro quo way. I mean in a, we give up that which is lesser in order to gain that which is greater. And that's a part of discipleship from beginning to end. To lay down one's life for one's friends is to show great love for them. But in that great love, we actually gain something greater than we lost. But it's not academic or abstract, because now they've seen the glorified, resurrected body of Christ. And maybe there's a little like, okay, I can do this because I've seen where this goes. Not just a, well, I hope they remember me at my funeral. but the promise has some flesh and bone to it. I no longer call you servants because the servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I'll call you friends. For everything I learned from my Father, I made known to you. Why would he say that?
It goes back to the parents and children, now that they've kind of
Ah,
matured. And
oh, I love that.
now he's saying, well, you're now adults, fully.
Yeah, I love that. That, we know because of our age, maybe, that trying to be your small child's best friend can cause more harm than good. And subsequent generations continue to struggle with that concept. But there is a beauty in being the adult friend of your adult child. Like the job of the directive parent, go here, do that, is done. But the role of a parent never ends. And so maybe that in that maturing relationship, there is now something new and different and good. They've called Jesus rabbi a lot, teacher. They've called him master and they've called him Lord. And he never says it's not true. He just kind of implies that part is now been completed. It's been fulfilled. If you've ever had an influential teacher in your life, like in school or something, and you ever get the chance to meet them years later, that doesn't always happen, but sometimes it does. Or if you taught, did anyone ever come to you and say thank you years after the fact? I try to do that to a couple of teachers. They've always seemed to appreciate it. I know my parents always loved that when someone approached them years after the fact. But it's like the circle is now complete. We'll talk about bearing fruit in just a second. There's the fruit that's now being born. Like you spend all this time and all this effort and all this love and all this care, and you hope it works out, but you don't really know until maybe closer to the end. And so, and maybe you see this teacher, and they're always going to be your Mrs. So-and-so or whatever. But the roles have changed. Jesus remains rabbi and master and Lord, but he says that's not all that there is anymore, because even those had their purpose, and their purpose was to raise you, was to grow you, to mature you. And I call you friends. I've heard critiques in the past that the gospel song, What a Friend We Have in Jesus, is trivializing our relationship with Jesus. And I see how that could be the case, but I don't think that's the only thing about it. And I think it also says something deeply profound. Not that he's my buddy. He has chosen to call me a friend when there's really no reason for that. Like, I'm just not that cool. But remember, we didn't choose him. He chose us. And that's kind of saying something. That Jesus would choose, no, call me your friend. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you. What has he appointed us to do?
Bear fruit.
Go bear fruit. Fruit that will last. And so that whatever you ask my Father's name, he will give you. This is my commandment. Love each other. But
We also have been given free will, and we can decide that we want to follow Jesus.
that's true. However, are our free wills free enough from the brokenness of our humanity to choose that which is truly good? And that's kind of a philosophical argument that's been going on for 1,000 years. He first loved us. He first chose us. And so without him loving us and choosing us, perhaps then our free wills would not be able to respond at all. It would be akin to one of those stories where like a child grows up in the wild and raised by wolves and stuff, and then they get reunited in humanity and expect them to have table manners. That doesn't happen. You got to be taught that. It doesn't mean they lack the capacity, but that capacity has been untapped. And there's no way for them to get it from the wolves or from the wild. It requires the love of someone else to show them a way that they wouldn't be able to figure out on their own.
Well, look at Helen Keller. You know, where she had a teacher that literally taught her everything.
Yeah. If you've if it's been a while since you've like read the book or seen the movie or read a story or whatever, the profound connection that happened almost accidentally between Helen Keller and Annie Sullivan, where Helen Keller could neither see nor hear. How do you reach someone who can't see or hear? And somehow it worked. But for years, I mean, imagine just like living in a dark cave where stuff can happen to you, but you have no idea until it's happened. You really don't have an idea what it is. And so all those things, and and Helen Keller, who eventually is able to talk and write, and has this really incredible life. But that came from someone reaching into the deepest of darkest pits to try to pull somebody out and into life. Fantastic. And I just think it is worth an underline that we are to bear fruit. To be fruitful means to produce something that is kind of the right culmination of a purpose. The right culmination of an apple tree is to produce an apple, and in that apple there are seeds which will produce more apple trees, and so on and so forth. And the same thing with humanity and children, but also with humanity and creative arts or physical endeavors. The proper end to our abilities is to make this thing that is lasting and right and good from our ability, and then something that will carry on. Something that maybe carries on forever, something that carries on for the next generation. And so we're built and expected to bear fruit. And it's like almost before he closes this off, one more reminder that fruit is going to be directly connected to loving each other. You want to bear good fruit in the name of God, love other people. You want to love God himself, who loved you first and chose you, love other people. You want to fulfill the commandments of God. You want to abide with him, love other people, and love them as Jesus himself loves them. And that's really the deal. Okay. All right, we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.